Hello, welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann. Today I'm doing the What the F Are You tag, which was originally created during Pride Month by Kevi over at Say Kevi. And I don't think I've been tagged by anyone, but apologies if I've missed that. But I've just really enjoyed seeing lots of people doing this tag and thought I would join in because as we'll get to in, what is it, prompt number 8, I think our identities really influence what we read and how we talk about it. So I feel like if I'm going to be talking about what I read, I might as well explain where I'm coming from. So I will have all the prompts below and I will do timestamps because I'm going to try to keep this short, but I have a feeling I might rant about some of these potentially, or just include way too much detail. So if you want to just go to things you're particularly curious about, you can do that down below. Okay, so prompt number 1. What the F is your name, and does it have any meaning? So of course my name has a lot of personal and family meaning, yeah, so I guess Beth Ann is actually a what is the word, like, it's a smushed together name. My real name is Elizabeth Ann. I don't know why my parents picked Elizabeth and Anne. I think they thought it sounded nice. I'm not a huge fan of Elizabeth because it sounds way more ladylike than I have ever been. I think it's also from the Bible, which I'm sort of like personally offended by, although that's not a reason why my parents chose it. But I really like the smushed together Beth Ann. Partly because to me it does speak to the Southern heritage that I have on my dad's side, because those sort of names are more common, tend to be more common in the South of the US. It's pretty unique. So it's nice to have always been the only Beth Ann in my classes, etc. So yeah, I really like my name, and it's definitely mine. All right, number 2, what the F is your gender? So I am a woman, and prompt number 3, what the F are your pronouns? She, her, hers. And I am a cisgendered woman. Prompt number 4, what the F is your ethnicity? Do you even need to ask? um, so Definitely Northern European mutt as far as we know, and my family, we have some genealogy nerds, and it's been traced back pretty far on multiple sides of my family. So definitely folks from England, and most of my ancestry is from Germany, about 75%. But because Europe is Europe, there's probably some muttness in there. But yeah, that's where people in my ancestral family tree come from, is England and Germany, what we now call England and Germany. Okay, and then number 5, what the F is your sexuality? I am bisexual or pansexual. I use either one. Kevi includes the question why, which I just get such a huge kick out of. My answer is just like, have you seen women? I mean, they're freaking beautiful. But that's a bit reductive. And so one reason why I am happy with either label, bi or pan, is because even though bisexuality, most people consider that it does not exclude non-binary genders, but I'm a very literal person, and so I just can't get past that bi prefix because I'm really not picky. And yeah, I'm not restricted at all to just binary genders in who I find sexually attractive. Then prompt number 6, what the F do you do besides Booktube? I assume this means for fun. Obviously I read, aside from watching Booktube and making my own videos. I also really like to do outdoors stuff. I like to go hiking, especially in the spring and fall when the sun is not so bright. Those are really the main things that I do for fun. I do like to cook, which, sometimes is a chore, but I try to make sure that I keep it fun, and I like to try new recipes. I like to try new styles of cooking. So that's really fun. Not a baker. I find baking too exact. I much prefer stovetop cooking, or if I'm cooking in the oven, various types of like roasting things, and I guess baking savory stuff, because a lot of that is just less finicky. Baking is annoying. I like to experiment. So is that everything I do for fun? I mean, I'm a parent, so I feel like a lot of my for fun stuff has been restricted. in recent years because I have a lot less free time than I used to. Okay, prompt number 7. What the F other identities do you claim? This is the one I feel like can get a little bit long, so I'll try to keep it short. But I just mentioned I'm a parent, so I think being a parent, and in particular being a mom, is definitely an identity. One of the reasons I think that matters is just partly because I spend so much time in that role. But then also just like there's sort of like a trite saying of like you have a baby and then your heart is walking around out there in the world, is no longer in your body. And like that is such a visceral feeling for me sometimes, where it's literally like I can look at her and it's like it feels like my chest is empty and I am literally looking at my heart. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but like maybe I've just taken that saying like too much to heart. But it really feels that way, and it's terrifying. And it's also wonderful because I think I created the most amazing human being. I should say we, my husband contributed blueprints, I guess. No, he's an amazing parent. But yeah, but it's just like we created the most amazing human being. So yeah, I mean, it's wonderful, but yes, terrifying and definitely really makes me feel vulnerable because that visceral sense that like literally the most important part of me, which is a terrible reductive thing to say, but like in a way it's true that there she is, this like different entity that's outside my body, which is a feeling I didn't have before this. So okay, so that's one identity. All right, so some other identities. So there's some weird, like thinking about identities is really weird. So like I really wanted to put scientist on here, and I know there's a lot of there are sort of like some cultural level conversations about how in capitalism we're really sort of pushed to claim our professions as our identities, and that might not really be right. But it feels right to me, thinking of like I understand the wrongness of that in a systemic way, but for me personally, it feels true. And so part of that is because being a scientist is a label that wraps up a whole lot of other things. Like it includes being open-minded. It includes being able to change your opinion on a topic based on updated evidence. It includes a priority on rational thinking as much as possible. It includes sort of an ability or a priority for being able to remove yourself emotionally from a situation. And these are like, I guess those are skills, but they're wrapped up in this identity. And those are very important things to me, both professionally, but then also in how I approach my personal life. And my public life, as a voter, for example. So yeah, and then the other thing with scientists is that I think a lot of the identities that we claim most openly and talk about are identities on the basis of which we've experienced oppression. And it's weird for me to talk about oppression as a very privileged person, except that as a scientist, I have experienced so much crap. um, and, like overtly sexist comments ranging from borderline sexual harassment to, especially in the pandemic, I have had repeated comments from people who are senior to me about how I should start considering a career change because I'm not, this is like a direct quote from a Zoom meeting I had where a mentor of mine said, because you're not going to make it in academia, just like all the other mothers of young children. Like as if that was just like a fact that I needed to accept, even though on paper that's like, you can't say that about my metrics. So, like absolute BS that are the intersection of being a scientist and being a woman. And I could rant about that a lot more, but I'm trying really hard not to. I'm trying to be like, okay, but what's the exact thing you want to say here, Beth Ann? But yeah, and so those are reasons why it's important to me that even though it's a profession and it shouldn't be so integrally tied to who I am, it is a very important identity in my life. Yeah, and so then two that I think are related are I do think that reader is a pretty strong identity for me. And again, because it overlaps with some of the things that I mentioned with scientists, like being open-minded, wanting to expose myself to evidence, wanting to update my worldview based on new evidence. And going along with that is my identity as an ally to oppressed groups of people. And I say that not because I think I'm doing a great job. I think I need to do a lot better, but because like I think it achieves that level of identity because it is so important to my concept of who I am. It's like if I'm not observing problems in the world and trying to figure out what I can do to alleviate them, then in my brain, I'm not a good person. So it's like that is an important aspect of my identity is trying to be an ally. And that goes along with reader and with scientist of like sort of this constant curiosity and wanting to learn and sort of those values that I hold along with it, like I've said about rational thinking and updating my worldview with evidence and that sort of thing. So those are all sort of intertwined and are very important to who I think I am. Then some more silly ones. Well, actually, okay, I have one more. This is a little bit silly, but also not silly, which is Redhead. And so going back to that point I made earlier about a lot of the identities we claim are based on the oppression we experience. And again, that's a stupid word to use for this because most redheaded people are by definition privileged, especially in the US because we are white. But I have experienced in particular a lot of sexual harassment that hinges on that identity. And especially growing up, so in a very formative period, I was experiencing that sexual harassment. And it's slowed off a little bit now, partly because my hair has gotten darker and I think it's a little bit less obvious that I'm a redhead. But yeah, also because people say shit to teenagers that they don't say to a 33-year-old. So yeah, so that's also sort of an important identity. And yeah, okay, so then the others are a little bit silly. So one is East Coaster, which I never would have claimed until I lived in Minnesota for 3 years. Because living in the Midwest, and I also have worked for 8 years for substantial periods of time in Illinois as well. And it's just like, it's just really driven home that there are real regional cultural differences that I sort of scoffed at before I lived in the Midwest. But it's just like, I did not feel at home in the Midwest. And it was because of the people and the way, and I hate to, I do have good friends who are Midwesterners, so I'm not trying to be insulting or really lump people together, but there is just sort of this general cultural thing where it can be hard to get to know Midwesterners. And I know they say the same thing about East Coasters, that we're offensive and we're blunt and stuff. But with Midwesterners, it was always so confusing with me because I would think I was hitting it off with someone and that we were really connecting. And then the next step of like the next hangout would like never happen. So yeah, it was bizarre. So I'm an East Coaster. East Coast culture is where I'm at. The other one that's a little bit silly is cat lover, like cat person. But like the older that I get, the less I understand or have any like empathy with the desire for people to own dogs. Like I just do not get it. And I don't think I would claim an identity as a cat person, except that dog people are so like rah, rah, rah about it. Maybe it's just the ones that I know, but I'm just like, I don't get it and I do not want to be that. And I freaking love cats. So we're over here in cat person territory. So I don't know. Maybe you understand what I mean, maybe not. I don't want to be offensive, so I'm not going to try to say anything about dog lovers. I do enjoy dogs. I'm just glad I don't have to take them home. Okay, I think that's my identities. Sorry. All right, prompt number 8. How the F do your identities influence what you choose to read? So I think they absolutely do. I think they do for everyone. I think especially for me, it's at a very sort of front of my brain cognitive level. And it's because of those things like wanting to get more evidence about my worldview, for example. So, and my priority of trying to be a better ally. And so part of the self-education piece of that is reading. So yeah, my identities absolutely influence what I choose to read. And then also my love of things like fantasy and sci-fi, like all of those genre fiction. My love of genre fiction is because of escapism. I've made reference to the ways in which my identities have led to awful stuff. And I'm not going to go into detail, but it's like, yeah, you need to escape from, some of the things that people say and things that people do to you based on the identities that I've claimed. So I fully admit that some of my reading, and sometimes quite a bit of it, is escapist. And I think that's fine. Okay, and then finally, prompt number 9 is who the F do you tag? I'm not going to tag anyone because this tag has been around for a while at this point, and I also feel like it's the kind of tag that I don't want to pressure people to do at all because it can get so personal, or somebody might feel pressure to make it personal but be uncomfortable with that. So yeah, so I don't want to tag people, but like if you're watching this and you've generally been having fun watching these tags and sort of want to share more with the Booktube community and haven't done this already, please go ahead and do it. Consider yourself tagged. Okay, I think that's it from me. This is a long video. All right, I will see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.